Welcome, I'm Bruce Munro, and with me is International Relations Specialist Professor Robert Patman, and this is Global Insight. Boris Johnson and Donald Trump are two bigger-than-life political figures. One is in waiting for the keys to Downing Street, and the other looks like he can do anything and still remain in the White House. Welcome, Robert.
Good morning, Bruce.
Boris and Donald are dominating headlines at the moment, but in the case of Mr. Johnson, there's an important link with New Zealand that hasn't been getting much attention. What is that, and why is it significant?
Well, first of all, let's contextualise it a little bit. Mr. Johnson looks like he's going to become Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He's in a two-horse race at the moment with Jeremy Hunt, the Foreign Secretary, and it looks like by the early next week he'll become the new Prime Minister. And he has become a controversial figure because of it. He's been associated with Islamophobia. He's likened the burqa, for example, to Muslim women wearing letterboxes or looking like bank robbers. He's demonised the EU leadership. He's compared it with Hitler. And he's basically been less than truthful during the Brexit campaign when he said voting leave would mean that 350 million would automatically be available each week for the National Health Service. None of these allegations have proved to be true. So this person, who has a less than glorious track record, is about to become Prime Minister, it would appear, of the United Kingdom. How does this come about? Well, it probably comes about because 0.1% of the population, which is 160,000 white, rather affluent men, largely, are voting for him. So that's the situation. Now, where's the New Zealand link? Well, the New Zealand link, intriguingly, a few weeks ago, Winston Peters, the Foreign Minister, publicly endorsed Mr. Johnson in the race for the position of Prime Minister and thought he described him as charismatic. He thought he would be a popular choice as leader. And that's a potentially risky position for the Foreign Minister to take.
Why haven't Mr. Peters' comments elicited much reaction?
I think, well, quite understandably, most people in this country do not follow the intricacies of domestic politics. They're not aware that most British people, according to opinion polls, regard Mr. Johnson as a buffoon, an insubstantial figure who's more into demonstrations of faith than demonstrations of capability and competence. The reason it's a bit risky for Mr. Peters is that and why it hasn't got much coverage is, first of all, I think Mr. Peters was expressing his personal view. It's not the view, I think, shared by the Prime Minister or the Trade Minister. But it's risky because we are engaged in a trade negotiation with the EU, and the EU have made it quite clear they have even less respect for Mr. Johnson than they had for his predecessor, Mrs. May. So, in a sense, given that we're engaged in a free trade agreement with the EU, which is worth over $20 billion, praising Mr. Johnson may be something of a political risk for this country. But I think the other reason it hasn't got too much coverage is because we in New Zealand often rely on our news from some of the mainstream media, and much of the downside of Mr. Johnson's career gets little coverage in the likes of The Sun, and the Daily Express, and some of our media draws on that. So some of his darker moments have not been covered in much detail.
In Washington, Mr. Trump seems to be able to say whatever he likes and get away with it. The latest incident was those racist tweets directed at those 4 Democratic congresswomen saying that they should go back to the crime-infested countries they'd come from. Why is he able to get away with this?
I'm not sure he has got away with it fully. The House of Representatives under the Democrats, under the control of the Democrats, have formally condemned the president's behaviour as racist. And I think this episode, more than anything else, makes it very difficult for the President of the United States to escape the description of being a white supremacist or a white nationalist now. Before, I think commentators hesitated to say it. So he's unapologetic about his comments, and he will clearly solidify his support amongst his base. But will his base be enough to give him the necessary support to be re-elected? He's behind, according to most opinion polls, many of the other contenders from the Democratic Party in polls. So he solidified his base, and he won't do any harm amongst those already supporters of Mr. Trump. I'm talking about the hardliners, the 25 or 30% of the base support for him. But I think he's probably alienated a lot of Americans who wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. And it's once again a demonstration of Mr. Trump's precarious grasp of reality. His own family, immigrants originally. He was from Germany. His family was from Germany several generations back. And 3 of the people he told to go back home were born in the United States. It's also given them quite a considerable opportunity, which is now being, I think, to some extent seized upon by the likes of Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, to score some pretty powerful political points against Mr. Trump's leadership, particularly on the migrant issue on the border. So, yes, I mean, I'm not sure he's actually getting away with it.
Should the New Zealand government be staying quiet on this?
No. It was interesting to me that the Prime Minister did condemn Mr. Trump's language, but it was only at the instigation of an interviewer who said, does New Zealand have anything to say about this? Now, the reason I say, of course, our viewers might say, well, New Zealand's a small country. We can't comment on the internal affairs of other countries, but Mr. Trump doesn't hesitate to comment on the internal affairs of other countries. And the fact of the matter is, after Christchurch, the lesson of Christchurch is that we do not allow racist narratives to go unchallenged. And I think that the New Zealand government has to get fully up to speed with the post-Christchurch era. It cannot allow this sort of language to go unchallenged. I think New Zealand should be, as it is with the Christchurch call, trying to stop online extremism, trying to curb public extremism, which involves issues of race and ethnicity. I think it's incumbent, I think people in this country expect New Zealand to be good and be consistent with its ideals on human rights and tolerance and diversity at home. We expect to project that internationally.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Catch us next time on Global Insight. Ka kite anō.